let's get going. So again, very casual today. You know, I have this agenda, but it's really just intended to be kind of like a brief rundown of what's happening. So it's pretty light. So just a quick intro to the team. Again, I'm Erin Griffith. I'm the program manager. The Fedora team is small but efficient, we'll call it. So Danny Bernstein is our tech lead. It says acting tech lead right now. Danny, for those of you that may or may not know, has taken a position at another program within Lyrasis, the Palace Project. So Danny is still working with us in a part-time capacity, or like a portion of his time capacity, filling in that role and really guiding and helping us through a transition. So Danny is definitely around, but he is moving to a new opportunity. We also have Mike Ritter, who is one of our developers on the Fedora team. Then you can also see a list of our current contributors. So these are our committers that are actively involved right now with bug fixes, development, anything that we've got on the book. So these are the folks that are here. So we've got Jared Wicklow and John Roby from the University of Manitoba. We have Ben Pennell from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Damien Katz from Villanova, Calvin Shu from the National Library of Medicine, and Thomas Bernhardt from DocuTeam. So those are our current core contributors, but there are, there's a vast list of folks who have popped in to work over a period of time, help develop a feature, things like that. And we definitely appreciate all their contributions as well. Being open source, we are run or kind of managed by a governance group. And with us today, we've got Jennifer Gilbert from the National Library of Medicine, who is our incoming governance chair, and Tim Shearer, who is still in his term technically until September, but he is the outgoing governance chair, and Tim is from UNC Chapel Hill. So thanks for joining us today, guys. So I do know that the invitation was open for people of all levels to join us. So really briefly, I just wanted to talk kind of about what Fedora is, what we do, and our purpose. So we are an open source preservation focused repository platform, and people typically use it for managing and disseminating their digital content. So we originally founded in 1997 by Sandy Payette and Carl Lagos at Cornell University. And we have seen several iterations of the software up to and including version 6, which was just released last year. So Fedora is generally used by a wide variety of institution types. We have cultural heritage organizations and scientific research centers that use Fedora to store and provide access to their sometimes large and complex digital collections that they've got in-house. So our members and users tell us that one of the reasons that they continue to support and advocate for Fedora is this kind of long-standing and well-established community that we have that surrounds it. We've got folks on old versions of Fedora, new versions of Fedora. We've been around for quite a long time, but Fedora has always sought really to do what it does best, and that's focus on digital preservation, and not stray far from that. And the community that's here and supportive of us is that's what they love most about Fedora, and that's why they continue to stay here and help others within the community. And so with the newest version of the software, we really doubled down on that digital preservation piece of the application. So we implemented the Oxford Common File layout as a persistence layer, which we're going to chat about really briefly in a minute, but that's, we kind of went back to those digital repository or, digital preservation roots with 6. So again, for the folks that are maybe new to Fedora, we like to think of Fedora kind of like the plumbing in your house, but the plumbing of the repository system. So it's not always pretty or front-facing like the Samvera or Islandora front ends, but it really is crucial to the proper operating of your repository system, much like plumbing is to your house. It kind of sits there underneath the wall, behind the walls, and it does what it's supposed to do. So a lot of folks think that, Fedora 6 might be best thought of kind of as like essential repository middleware. So it sits, below those front ends and right above the storage layer. And so what it does when it's sitting there is it just serves to provide the data back to the front end users. So it takes care of things, objects and things that you put in it, takes care of their metadata, takes care of their relationships, and then also possibly the metadata about those relationships. And so what it does is it just serves it back to the front end systems. and it just chugs away in the background doing what it's supposed to do, much like the plumbing in your house. So nobody really likes to talk about the plumbing. It's not as pretty, but we definitely always want it working. So that's the goal. So I know that we have talked in the past and we've given presentations and done highlight reels, things like that, about the new and updated features of Fedora 6. And I think those are all very important. And I'm going to provide some resources at the end if you want to have a deeper dive into any of the features. But really brief, I just wanted to go through a few really briefly today, and not really this isn't intended to be necessarily like a super deep dive. So in Fedora 6, we have, like I spoke about, this enhanced digital preservation capability, thanks to the adoption of the Oxford Common File layout as our persistence layer. So that sits there and it manages and dictates the way that the data looks on disk. So that is there. And we also have extensive migration tooling and documentation now available, thanks to an IMLS grant that we were given that was intended to help lower barriers to migration of all older versions of Fedora to get them to Fedora 6. So, we now have a tool that can assist with the migration. We have a validator that helps ensure your content is all moved over correctly. And we also have this very large toolkit that is kind of like step-by-step instructions and user stories about the process of migrating that we did with our 2 pilot partners from the grant. So that's all available. 6.0 offers a built-in simple search feature, which is not entirely meant to replace Solr, but was a request of the request of developers and users that it be available. So now with 6, that is accessible. Another cool feature that we have is our real-time performance monitoring that we have through Grafana and Prometheus. So you can see what's happening in your repository in real time. There's some very nice graphs and charts that you can look at to see. And for us, we used it as a tool when we were developing the software or developing the version to find out where bottlenecks were happening, and we were able to dive in really quickly and really easily using this real-time monitoring to find out what was going on. And then the last one that I just want to touch on here is with the newest release of Fedora, so version 6.2, we now offer metrics collecting. So this was a community ask and something that we were able to deliver on. So you get a very simple output of things like number of objects by MIME type, byte count, and there's some different configurable options there that you can look at. So you can get a breakdown of what's in your repository. So the reason that, those are the features, but the purpose and kind of things we really wanted to discuss today is why we're putting such a large emphasis on bringing the community forward to Fedora 6. We know it's important. We know that it's a fancy new version of Fedora, but really trying to explain why this pushes on. And so, like I mentioned earlier, Fedora has always sought to do what it does best, and that's focus on digital preservation. So with 6, we really went back to the core belief of Fedora when we were thinking about what it looked like. So we know that when Fedora 4 was developed, we made the decision to incorporate mode shape, which at the time had some really nice features and great out-of-the-box features, but ultimately it ended up not living up to the needs of our community of users. So, there was a lack of transparency into what was happening. It was kind of a black box of unknowns. So the move also, when we asked people to migrate from 3 to 4, we know that it was not a significant request. 4 was an entire rewrite of the application, and we were asking people to migrate, invest these resources, and then 4 underperformed. So I just want to make a really brief note when I say that 4 underperformed and didn't serve. There are a lot of folks out there that are running versions of Fedora 4 and have instances that are up and running without problem. But ultimately, mode shape is no longer being supported by the community that created it. It's kind of end of life. It is this black box of unknowns. So when we were thinking about 6, we needed more transparency into the application. So with 6, what we did is we entirely eliminated mode shape, and we opted to adopt the Oxford Common File layout for preservation. So the OCFL is, it's an application-independent approach to digital information storage. So what it does is it offers a very structured, transparent, and predictable layout, which in turn will help promote long-term best practices within the repositories. So the OCFL itself is a specification that's created and maintained by an editorial board who, their goal is to make sure that the spec is advancing to meet the needs of its community. Fedora 6 uses an OCFL Java implementation of the OCFL specification. And if you want more details on that and what that looks like, you can go to the OCFL website, which is ocfl.io. Again, I'll share that in the resources at the end. But we know that there is hesitation within the community about making the move to 6, but we've done everything that we can to ensure that your data is going to remain intact, uncorrupted, and preserved in a way that's intended to long outlast the hardware that it's was originally stored or created on. And that is thanks to the OCFL that we've chosen to go this route so that we can secure your stuff, essentially. So mode shape, no more Oxford Common File layout, yay. And the last piece, we need to talk about Fedora 3. So another reason that we are putting this emphasis on getting the community to 6 is because Fedora 3 is no longer being supported by the community. So it is technically at end of life, and it has been for several years now. And so we do understand and we do know that the majority of our users are on versions of Fedora 3 because Fedora 3 does exactly what it's supposed to. It sits there and it chugs away in the background and nobody has to think about it and nobody has to look at it and it just works, right? But because Fedora 3 is end of life, it puts the accessibility and the functionality of those repositories and everything that's in them, it puts them at risk. And we obviously don't want our users to lose any of that. So there's this massive need to bring the community forward, but we are thankful now to be in a position to be able to help with that, thanks to things like the grant and the toolkit that we now have available, the utilities and the tools that we have to make migrations easier. So at just really briefly, at the end of June, for anybody that's connected on our community listservs, I sent out the first draft of the migration toolkit, which is this document that I keep talking about, that was created in collaboration with our 2 pilot partners, so University of Virginia and Whitman College. And the toolkit itself provides instructions, user stories, templates, metadata remediation guides, links to all of the tools that are available and everything that you could need, hopefully, to walk you through a migration from 3 to 6. So, like I mentioned, there's the tools and we've got a validator to make sure your content's moved over. So I'll give you access to all of that stuff in a minute or two here. But essentially, we're doing all that we can to help lower the migration barriers for folks to get to 6, that we know that this is important and we're here to support that work, and anything that we can do to assist is really what we're here for. So it's not an easy process, and we know that there's probably still hesitation within the community to take the leap, but we truly believe in 6, and we believe that it's given us the opportunity to give back to our users and give them what they've always asked of Fedora. So something that's robust, it's flexible, and it's going to operate much like 3 does, just chugging away in the background. So hopefully you will share that sentiment with us. But I could talk about this all day. That's not the intent of today. You don't want to hear me talk forever. I think most importantly, maybe what people are here to hear about is what others are doing. So, our users and those that have already gone through this process are really the best people to talk about challenges that they've seen, ways they've overcome it, and things like that. So I'd love, we've got some people here that are willing to share their stories. So I'm just going to stop sharing here now. And we are going to see, I know I've got some folks here. I don't know, Kate or Josh, did you guys, I know you had an opportunity to share a little bit yesterday. Did either of you want to briefly go through your most recent migration? So, and just so that folks know, we talk about migrations and being here to support migrations. These are migrations of all kinds. So University of Maryland, where Kate and Josh are, they migrated from, I'll let them fill in the details, but they were getting to 4. So it's not necessarily a move to 6, but I'm using what we now have available to get them there. So I don't know if either of you guys want to take a minute and talk about what you've done. I will pass off the mic.
Sure, I can do that. And Kate, just jump in if I miss anything. So yeah, we recently completed a migration of our AV content from what was actually a Fedora 2 based system, which we're still running for a lot of image content, into Avalon Media System. And we were very, very happy with how things played out. We were able to use the migration utils repo and fork it and make some modifications that allowed it to work with Fedora 2 pretty easily. And then we essentially just adopted what I would call extract, transform, load process. So we didn't think of like the migration as, you know, one fell swoop coming out of our old system and landing in the new one, but rather it went to disk. We gathered all the files because the actual binaries weren't stored in Fedora 2 for our AV. We were storing just the metadata, and then we were using the rels ext content type in Fedora 2 to point to a streaming server. And so the files were available in the streaming server and also in our preservation systems. And so we had to gather all our files, but we used migration utils to extract our metadata from Fedora 2. And we, when we forked it, we wrote a little Python script that would read that repository that the migration utils, or that tree of files that the migration utils creates, and would extract the information that we wanted to migrate into Avalon. And so we had, with Avalon Media System, we had already a target. We had a batch load CSV format that we could look to as the target that we were going for. And so we wrote a Python script that would use the output of migration utils, write CSV files that fit that format. And then we just did an rsync of all of our binaries onto the Avalon Dropbox, and collection by collection, we were dropping our CSV files into Avalon, and it was pretty seamless. We did have, there are always pain points in this. I think the biggest pain point for us was actually in keeping track, like figuring out where all the files were. These AV assets dated back to really the 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. So they've been around, and they actually predated all of our current preservation workflows. And so not everything was done the way that we currently do it. And so we had to do some searching around. We had to do some manual extract and transcoding from our streaming server to get back to a file we could import. But we managed to do all that. Avalon performed really well. We did have one issue with, we were running it in Kubernetes, and when Avalon does the transcoding, it of course takes a lot of resources. And we found at one point that it started to consume all the resources of the cluster. And so it created this sort of cascading performance problems throughout our Kubernetes cluster. But those are kind of the learning, that's the learning curve that everybody goes through. And we managed to deal with that. That was just a Kubernetes configuration issue. And we feel really good about it. So we've migrated about, what is it now? So it was about 9,000 audio and video objects. The preservation masters of those are many, many terabytes, but we didn't actually put the preservation masters into Avalon. Obviously, we just put what we call an access master, and then that gets transcoded into the 3 different levels of streaming files that Avalon does. And so we think it went really well. Our users are, as far as I know, pretty happy with it so far, and everybody is now getting ready to learn how to, be in charge of their own stuff, because in the old system, essentially everything had to come through me, and it was a very clunky way. We had to update those AV assets, but now all of our curators can curate their own metadata, can download files from Avalon for users. So we just actually added a feature to Avalon to store the access master in untranscoded form so that it can easily be downloaded. And there's a link on every object in Avalon now. So a curator can log in and download that file and send it to a researcher if they need to. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to hear about, but.
chime in real fast about the capability URL functionality? Because I think that one's also really key for us. So we have a good amount of materials that are provided only upon request by the curators, right? Or that might be restricted to the institution, but external visitors could and patrons could request that. So in addition to building out this file download capability, which was how we had previously been fulfilling a lot of request fulfillment in that regard, what we've done now is created functionality so that our curators can go in, generate a capability URL or a tokenized URL, and provide that directly to our researchers, anytime that they need it just for streaming purposes. And that limits unnecessary downloading and transmittal of files through our request management system. And it greatly streamlines the request fulfillment process for our whole organization. And we do have a number of our users and the people who have to work in these systems are really quite pleased with it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Does anybody have any questions for Josh or Kate? We can obviously come back to questions if you've got them or think of them later. You can either drop them in the chat or just feel free to turn your mic on. Cool. All right. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing what you guys have done. Yesterday, Kate, you were able to provide, you had a link for to the repository. Do you mind sharing that just so folks can see? No, thank you. Thanks, John.
I was just
amazing.
pasting it in when you said that.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, if anybody wanted to take a look, that's what they've offered up. I do know, so the folks at Maryland there, that's the first migration with Avalon that we have heard of. I know that Oliver Schoner from University of Berlin, they were one of the first Samvera and migrations of Fedora and Samvera. So you guys migrated quite a while ago, about a year ago now. You did your first steps there. I don't know if you wanted to just briefly, Oliver, share your experience or just let people know, what you guys kind of did. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's okay. That's for why I'm here. Yeah, I can tell you a little bit what we did about 1 year ago. In 2016, we introduced pure Samvera, then still Hydra application for some Prussian judgments, about 30,000 documents, and we used a Fedora 4 backend, and I wrote a small Hydra application on my own. We saw that we didn't like Moche very much, that's true. And when Fedora 6 came out, we decided to give it a try and to migrate the data. That was pretty easy. Well, it took some time because the documentation is never complete, and there are always small mistakes, but in the end it was quite easy to do that, and it was quite fast. The data is not big. We're dealing with just some gigabytes, not terabytes as with Joshua, but more documents, and it was all fine in the end. And they had to be made some minor applications in the front end as well, but only small ones, but difficult to find where the problem was in the end. Yeah, that's about my story. We're running more Fedora instances for totally different collections, and there we're also planning to migrate it from 4 to 6, but I think we're still facing some problems because we're making heavy use of external content in Fedora 4, which does not exist in the same way in Fedora 6, I think, and then there we have to rethink our design and so.
That's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions at this point? I'll just keep stopping because I know the intention is to allow everybody to have the time to ask the questions. So feel free to throw them in the chat or raise a hand or just unmute. All right. Well, I'm going to call on another person that I can see here in the group if they're willing to unmute and share a little bit. Damien, at Villanova, they're doing some interesting work with their Fedora, and I thought maybe folks might have some interest in it. So if you're up for it, Damien, you want to share what you've been working on?
Sure. So here at Villanova, we've been Fedora 3 users for a very long time. We have sort of a homegrown repository solution, which utilizes our ViewFind software as the front end, and then has some back-end administrative tools that sit on top of Fedora 3. And we rely on some of the automation like gsearch to populate ViewFind Solr index directly from the repository as things change. And so needless to say, we're overdue for an update, but we decided not to migrate to Fedora 4 at the time due to distrust of mode shape. But with Fedora 6, we feel that all of our requirements are really met. And so we've been taking this opportunity to sort of re-architect all of our back-end parts while still retaining ViewFind as our front-end user interface. And of course, one of the problems that we had with our Fedora 3 system was that everything was too tightly coupled because gsearch lived inside Fedora and depended on a very specific version of Solr. And after a certain point in time, it was no longer possible to update that anymore. And so basically we got stuck in 2015 and haven't been able to get out. So fortunately with the new system, we've taken a new approach and we're able to decouple these things better. So our basic plan is we have the Fedora 6 system acting as our repository. We're building a new sort of React-based administrative interface for our staff to manage content. And we're using the Fedora Camel toolbox, which is a set of automation tools that listens to messages inside Fedora and then takes action based on that. And this allows us to replicate sort of the gsearch Solr indexing functionality that we had in Fedora 3, but we're taking a slightly different approach in that we've created a new extension for the toolbox called the HTTP component, which just listens to messages inside Fedora and then posts them to an arbitrary API endpoint as JSON, which allows us to build a custom script that does all of the Solr indexing in response to those messages and decouples all the versions of all the things because we're just dealing with simple HTTP messages. And I think this is a tool that has a lot of potential applications in a lot of scenarios. I could ramble on at more length. Currently we're just in the process of developing our software and also maneuvering toward doing a full test migration. We've done migrations of small subsets of our data to prove that we can get data out of our old system and put it into our new system. But it's been, a process to get the 70 terabytes of open disk space we need to do a full test. I'm hoping that will happen later this month, though.
Awesome, thank you. And I do just want to point out that Damien and his colleague there, the Camel toolbox that he was speaking about, much of the development work, Damien and team were able to, they had this need and they brought it to the community and we were able to execute and deliver this little suite of integrations, thanks to community contribution. So that was, much appreciated. No, there were, so there's a question just here from the chat. It's a general question just asking about, is Fedora 6 supported by Samvera or Islandora yet? And if not, is support on their respective roadmaps? So, with Islandora and Samvera communities, we obviously try to maintain a close relationship with our front-end sister communities. And I know that in Islandora 2.0, one of our grant pilot partners, Whitman College, migrated from a Fedora 3 instance and an Islandora, I want to say 7 to Islandora 2.0. with the Fedora backend. So, we have heard and we understand that Islandora 2.0 does not necessarily require a Fedora underneath. It is possible to do it, but if you don't choose to go with a Fedora underneath, you're losing potentially that digital preservation layer that's going to be offered by Fedora, and specifically the OCFL if you're choosing Fedora 6. But again, we do try to make sure that representation from all of our sister communities or partner communities, we're listening in to make sure that as we move forward, both programs or all the programs, that we're maintaining a relationship so that integration is possible. I do know that Fedora, and I don't want to speak or give the wrong information here, but there's a Hyrax integration that that the Samvera community is waiting on for Fedora 6 specifically. But that, again, that is the most up-to-date information that I've heard. I don't know if anybody from the Samvera community specifically has a different comment on that. I do think that's where we stand for now.
Yeah, the Samvera community, this is John Dunn from Indiana, involved in Samvera as well. The Samvera community has been working on the Valkyrie as an adapter to various backends, and I believe that the official path to support for Fedora 6 is for Hyrax to work with Valkyrie and Valkyrie work with Fedora 6. Daniel Pierce, not to put him on the spot, is the technical lead for Hyrax. He may be able to provide more detail. He's on the call here as well.
Hello, this is Daniel. Yeah, that's basically the plan. Is we're waiting on Valkyrie to become the stable persistence layer in Hyrax, and Valkyrie has Fedora 6 support in it. We're just not running on Valkyrie in a stable fashion just yet within Hyrax. So it's coming soon.
And again, I'm just looking in the group here, and not to put anybody on the spot, but I know Rosie, you're heavily involved at IF, and I just want to make sure that what information I've given is correct in terms of a roadmap and things like that for the Islandora team. You can even just give a thumbs up. I didn't want to put you on the spot.
No worries. We have two ways that we use it as a file store for our binaries that are represented as Drupal files. So we manage them through Drupal, but they're in Fedora. And we also have a way to sync our RDF content from the metadata that we create in Drupal into Fedora. So we can have all of our content in Fedora. It's more of a one-way stream at the moment. So we do that because we know that Fedora has good preservation capabilities. But yeah, I'm not sure where the roadmap is going in terms of incorporating other aspects that Fedora has, such as access control and inheritance. But I look forward to figuring out if we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so that folks on this call understand where our program is at. So when we released 6, it kind of met all the check boxes that a lot of folks or a lot of people were asking or needing, when we reimagined what Fedora would look like. So, and we have not heard, we pulled the community several times to find out if there's specific feature sets that people are looking for, and there doesn't appear to be at this point. And I think it's partly due to the fact that people are still considering what their migration roadmap looks like. There doesn't appear to be a large feature set that is outstanding from the community. Obviously, please correct me if I'm wrong, and please lean into the community if there's something that you would like to see. So the program itself is we're undergoing kind of a strategic planning phase right now. We have a group of governance members and community members that are sitting on some subcommittees as we look to the future for Fedora. So these integrations and these pieces with our front-end communities and our partners, these are all things that we're considering as we look ahead for Fedora. Just so that everybody kind of understands the context of what we're in. We're here for support, migration support, bug fixes if they're coming up. Like, we're here for all of that, and we have the capacity to do that. But then in the background, governance and these subcommittees are focused on bringing the community, setting the roadmap for the community looking ahead. So There was another question here that I'm gonna give to everybody here because I'm not sure that I have the best answer for it. So it just said, so in going back to the Hyrax connections, so that means Hyrax version before 3.0 that doesn't have Valkyrie won't get Fedora 6 support. I'm not sure if there's somebody that can answer that.
Yeah, I believe that'd be correct. Versions of Hyrax before 3 would depend on the active Fedora gem to do access to Fedora, and I don't believe there's any work on bringing Fedora 6 support into the versions of active Fedora that those older versions of Hyrax use. So yeah, the path forward there would be to upgrade Hyrax to newer versions that will have Valkyrie and Fedora 6 support.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and the answer there, Daniel. Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions? One just popped up here in the chat and I'll just read it out. Is anyone using Pcdm within Fedora 6? We're particularly interested in how people have replicated physical and logical struct maps from METs in LEP/Pcdm.
So it's not really a direct answer to the question, but I can say that we have every intention of using Pcdm as we migrate forward. We have kind of a long path to get to Fedora 6, but as far as I'm aware, the plan is that we are going there, and there's currently no plan not to use Pcdm. But yeah, the specifics of what might be little wrinkles in actually using that with Fedora 6, I imagine it should be pretty seamless, but I can't speak from experience to say for sure.
I guess I'll just mention my understanding is that Samvera, or at least Hyrax, is using Pcdm, and that would be in Fedora 4, but I don't think there would be significant differences in terms of usage of Pcdm in Fedora 4 versus 6. They both support roughly the same feature sets in terms of LDP, so linked data platform support. For our own repository at UNC, which is a custom, we have two repositories. One's Hyrax, but the other one is a custom one built on Fedora 5. We are using Pcdm within that context, but we did not have to translate MET struct maps over into our Pcdm structures because we were not using METs in that capacity within our Fedora 3 instance. Yeah, we were just using relsext for doing the relationships between objects. So I can't respond really directly to how to map that into Pcdm, but I think it should be a reasonable thing to do, and it should look roughly the same between versions 4, 5, and 6.
Awesome, thank you. Hopefully that helps for the question that came through in the chat there. There was just a comment, and I'm hoping, Tom, that I'm not sharing this, and you'd sent me a message in the chat there. It just says, it was a ditto to the Pcdm. We need collections in support of multi-tenancy use of our OCFL store. I'm hoping that's okay that I shared that out loud. Are there any other questions? All right. Again, we are more than happy to take questions after the fact. I'm going to share resources in just a moment here. I just wanted, if Jamie, if you're willing to just share, you've got to, there's still time, but if you're willing to share a few minutes about what you guys are doing or what your migration story kind of looks like, that would be awesome.
Yeah, sure. So here at the University Library from the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, we started working with Fedora around starting 2019. We finished our first deployment in 2020. We worked specifically with a pilot project based on morpholexical data from the Alp region, and that was mostly text-based data, so it was fairly easy to implement it with Fedora. We decided to start with Fedora 5 back in the day. There wasn't like a big difference between Fedora 4 and 5 at the moment, but we knew, and that I think we also read like around, we saw around like people talking about that, that there were a little bit of changes on the API, on the REST API from Fedora, and the possibility to go in that direction. So we stayed on Fedora 5 for that reason. It's not much data. It wasn't that much data, but this data had very complex relationships between objects. So finally, at the end, we decided to use Fedora to store metadata and store the binaries from the research data, and this information was or is synced with a Solr component. We are working with we work with Blacklight as a front end. Was a fairly interesting project. Wasn't that complicated. We faced some challenges with Fedora 5 because we first tried to model the data, model the metadata with the RDF within Fedora, and the relationships we had back in the time were a little bit too complex. Back in the day, I think it wasn't open repositories. We talked about this with David and with Andrew, and at the end we decided, yeah, okay, we need to figure out maybe there's an easier way for us to implement the data and save the data, the metadata, and try to work with this limitation in a way. The problem we had back in the day also was we are trying to prepare. That was like within a bigger project. We tried to prepare the infrastructure here we have for archival projects in the next couple years, and once we saw that OCFL was in the works, and once we knew that Fedora 6 was gonna focus on that, we decided, okay, we need to migrate as quick as possible. We need to get out of ModShape here somehow. Yeah, because at the end, what we wanted also was to have this, our data and a better representation when we can say yeah, we don't need anything to understand how the data is kept on disk. All information is there. You can work with the things we have there. You don't need like specific transformations or a specific software for that. So that's what we did. That was this year. We finished the migration not long ago. We started like around a couple of months. We ran some tests. The big problem was we had we migrated around 400,000 objects, and apparently somehow there was something not working with our setup or configuration in the repository, so it took way longer than it should. That was something that we talked on Slack, and that was super helpful. Thanks for that, by the way. And yeah, finally we have a running Fedora 6 instance, and the prospects of new projects and the new services that some of the researchers are looking for and from us has yeah, some of these requirements are being analyzed right now, because we work with this pilot project and we want to extend what we implemented around Fedora. And we also decided back in the day, we worked with Fedora because we wanted to stay flexible as possible. We didn't want to be attached to a very specific software. We thought, okay, we can work with this in the data shift. With the data, we can work with this on the graphical user interface. We can work with something else, and that can change also. It is very interesting. The new projects and new prospects are being a little bit challenging in a good way, because we want to explore things from Fedora 6 and OCFL also. Things, for instance, like archival groups. That's a very interesting new feature. We want to try to test also the way to represent on disks, in a way to say the difference between direct containers and indirect containers, and things like that. We have a very heavy request, very heavy request from users. Also, there are people talking about ingesting big data, not big data itself, but like larger set of files. We also are thinking to use Fedora also to safeguard in a way also the digitalization projects we have here. We worked, for instance, for a while. We're working with Kitodo, for instance. That's something there's in the German community very used, and there are some things that we want to also prepare for long-term preservation, and the idea is that we are gonna use Fedora as a very big backbone for that. Yeah. I'm not sure if you have questions or anything. Feel free to ask in chat, or my email is also over on the Google Doc. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate you going through that. Does anybody else have any questions? We got a few minutes left here, whether for Jamie or anybody else that shared a story today. Questions we did. So how to get involved really briefly here. So every week we hold a weekly tech meeting. It is on Thursdays at 11 o'clock Eastern. So you can use the community calendar to, if you click on the event for weekly tech, you'll be able to get in and get the Zoom link for the weekly tech call. It is entirely open. It is intended for anybody to come and join, whether you're just coming to listen or you have a technical question or a non-technical question, please feel free to join us on that Thursday meeting. We have our communication channels that I gave you all the links to: Slack, the Google Groups mailing lists, and our community calendar. We also send out a monthly newsletter. If you're interested in getting those updates and finding out what's in there, you can always send me an email. And then the last way, obviously, to become a member, is to become a member. And maybe what I'll just do is, Tim, you've got a minute or two here if you want to just say a really quick hi and talk about the importance of membership really quickly.
Hey, so Tim Shearer, I'm at UNC Chapel Hill. I've been involved, or UNC's been involved in Fedora governance for a long time now. And I'll just say that my personal story was I was focused on us getting our work done and using the tools in the community, and slowly came to understand that those tools don't magically appear. They only exist if people resource them, both with their time, their energy, their intelligence, their passion, and their leadership. And I've come to transition both myself and work with UNC Chapel Hill software developers and others to help feed the community and be a part of it. And there are so many benefits, one of which is you find yourself in a community, but it's rewarding, it's good for your professional development, but it also ensures that the tools that we're working on serve your needs. So I would make a plea that you start by just joining the Slack channel and not bang your head against a wall. Ask questions and be there. but then consider whether your institution can provide financial support, or whether you might consider contributing code, and potentially joining leadership. We're trying to diversify the number and kinds of voices on governance, including a less heavy North American. We're trying to get folks from not just the United States and Canada, which is our primary set of users. So anyhow, please feel free to reach out if you want to talk to me, Jennifer Gilbert, who's the inbound chair, or Aaron, who's been leading us. And thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Tim. I see some folks are dropping off. We are at the top of the hour, so I appreciate everybody coming today. For those of you that have shared your migration stories, that was really excellent to hear from, and gives us, a lot of positivity as people think toward, their migration roadmap. So I'll hang out here for another minute or two. If anybody's got any more questions, please feel free. But hopefully you've got what you needed, and we'll see you all in the community.